Hello. I'm going to go through some of the tracks and samples used on one of the Mechanical Child songs on the basis that might be interesting to someone as to how you make this stuff. Stop that. This track is from later on in the album, and I picked it to go through because it is one of the ones that sounds, I think, the most organic. And my whole thing with this, I started to use some of these more AI-based tools that have come out, particularly with AI generative models that make sound. And I was trying to find different ways of using those that would be interesting. I think when people, especially people who are threatened by AI, when they talk about it, I think the idea is that you would go to a website like makemeasong.org and you'd type in, make me a song about loving my boyfriend, and that will be a hit single, and that the AI will spit that out with no human involvement, and that will, in the same way that Only an Armless Fancy from 1984 is a kind of computer generated mass market pap, that will replace humans. And that may happen, and if it does, like, I don't really care if the people who write that stuff get replaced, because they're hacks, so fuck them. And it'd be better if computers were doing that, because then people wouldn't be able to prance around the world as if they'd achieved something having achieved nothing. But that's not what is happening right now. What's happening right now is that you have these kind of very janky models that sort of make sound in a way, and the real hallmark of like generative art, it's not art, is it? Art is what you do with it, not the thing itself. Art's the idea, not the product. But the hallmark of the generative art is not dodgy hands, because it's quite good at hands now. The hallmark is that at a glance it looks exactly like the thing, but the closer you look, the less like the thing it is. So because of how it works, because it's about prediction of where pixels go and stuff like that. So you type in like a Botticelli painting of Steve Jobs eating a pie in the Double R from Twin Peaks, right? And like when you glance at it, it will look exactly like that, but as you go in, you go, that's his face is a bit weird and stuff like that. That's the way it works. I should type that in. And the same thing is true of sound. Is like when you type in, give me the break from a 70s funk record with a drum solo in it. Just give me the drum solo, and it'll come back, and it'll be something that, like, on first listens, it's like, it sounds exactly like a break from a 1970s funk drum solo. But then you kind of listen, it's like, not, the timing's not quite right, and everything's out of place. But what is there? And why it's interesting, I think, for making music is the feel of it is like immediately apparent. And so what you can do producing in something like Ableton is that you can then find that feel that you initially reacted to and then put it on record, which is really just what producing is anyway. You kind of, it's so much producing is like the initial thing is like, yeah, I get exactly what that is, but then like the hard work is fiddling with it until that's communicated to a wider audience and not just the person who already gets it. So what's interesting about the AI generative models is when you go to a site that does generative audio, and usually you can get like up to 10 seconds of audio at a time, you can type in something and you'll get back something that gets it, but then you take it back to Ableton and you try and make it into something that's listenable. The quality is unlike synthesized audio that you get from synths. It's not like the kind of thing you get from a sampler, or a sample library. So something like Contact, Becky Campbell, PCF Medical Contact Manager, a webinar on prostate cancer. That sounds interesting. I get these now because I'm old. What was I? I must stop being distracted. When you use a sample library like Contact, people will spend huge amounts of time and money recording every little bit of like you hit a piano and they'll put microphones on the keys and on the mallets and on the string and on the pedal and up in the room and under the thing, and they'll try and blend them together to make a perfect representation of that piano key, so that when you press a button on your fake keyboard, it will sound as close to a piano as possible. And the result of that is you get these kind of amazing sample instruments, but like they still, even at their very best, don't quite have the same quality as something that's just been like badly recorded in 5 minutes from an actual piano, right? And then obviously synthesis, which is when you use like algorithms and oscillators and things to algorithms now, oscillators in the past, but various electronic processes to compose sounds from the ground up, kind of a synthetic approach. You'll get that trademark synth sound. It's always a synth. It was known as a synth, and it's never going to come close to a real thing. With AI generated synthesis, you get sound that sounds like badly recorded real things. It's never going to sound quite the same as a real thing, but it is like, it has that quality of like raw, and as I say, quite badly recorded, but actual sound, and so it has an additional quality that's interesting. I'll show you what I mean. On this track, does bear this.
And policemen had hung tape across its mouth.
Got this kind of lot of that, and it starts off with this guitar thing. And it has a bunch of drums and stuff in there, and all of that stuff is fake. None of it's real. But again, if you listen to it, you can kind of see it's uncanny. That's the word. It's unheimlich. It's got that uncanny quality of like being far too close to the real thing. So this guitar is this track here, and I think I just reminded me of Jake Bugg, and I think I can't remember what I typed in something like, you know, strumming, poorly recorded strummed guitar, something like that. And that comes back. Now if I can look, I can go straight to that track and show you what it actually gave me when I played it. So if I played this. So that's the raw output. I'll do that again. This is the raw output that comes straight from the generative model when you type in guitar. Ableton, you find the bit of track that you're interested in. In this case, it was right at the beginning, just that kind of 2-chord thing. And then you warp it and speed it up, find the number one. So these warp markers are the number one and the 1 and the 3 in the bar. So you get this single bar of looped audio. And obviously you could move that. Everything else just sounds like a mess. So you've got that, and then that's the basis of your thing. And then I think after I had that, I was like, well, you'd want to have some kind of melody over the top of that. And I think with melody, one thing you can do is one thing I have done on some of the tracks is like you'll type in something like a single hit on a organ or whatever, and then you'll get like individual notes from the model, and then you can put them into a normal sampler. But on this, I didn't do that. I just used a Prophet 5 synth to make this melody line. Because honestly, if you want it to be a synthesizer, why would you have an AI fake a synthesizer? I just got an email from Libs of TikTok. I subscribe to all of the... I want to know what's happening. I want to know what these people are doing. Plus, I'm writing an album about QAnon, so it's important. But that is the sort of thing that probably should have made me redo the video when the Libs of TikTok email came up. Because please don't cancel me for that. It is for research. Yes, so if you want a synth, use a synth. I don't think there's any real reason to have a fake synth, though there probably is, because that's quite funny. As it goes on, I then wanted to shift the guitar to something else. So I think it's the same... No, it's a different sample. So this is another guitar, same basic idea, but sounding more like... That's what you get from the generative model. And again, I think the key to that one is not so much that sounds... Because that obviously does not sound good. Cheers, Tony Fraser, for sharing my post. I need to find a way of using OBS to disable notifications while I'm doing this. But thanks for sharing my post, man. It's nice of you if you're watching this. Not much use in that, but again, it's the feel, isn't it? It's like this, you get that sense straight of it. It's like sounds like a real thing that I've intentionally, that someone has recorded. And so you can find that feel. And in that case, all I really wanted from that feel was like a tiny, like half a bar of just durr. To give it that durr underneath. So once the thing shifts, we go into this kind of thing. Which is just the time-stretched first half bar of that little bit.
There came a day when a drunken fool lost...
You need stuff to go with that. And the main thing you want is beats, I think. Now, again... You can type in single hit on a kick drum, you're going to have a lot more luck using a normal kick drum. So I just used normal kick drum. That is a very basic Ableton included Kick 80s Spacecraft 1 kick drum. But then you type in something about beats and you get beats back, and you get lots of, you try it again, and again it's you type in the thing into the window. I did another video where I actually do the typing in, but just in case you didn't see that, you go to a website, there's loads, but the one in particular is like it's a text to WAV sort of thing. Basically it's a model that you type in anything you want and it gives you 2 seconds to 10 seconds of audio as a result. Go and find that other video on here and then you'll be able to see me actually doing that live, but it's just me typing into a box and having things come back. You do that a bunch of times until you get something where the feel is right, and in this case what I got back, the feel was this. You get that, you put it into Ableton and you find the beats. So each one of these little yellow dots is where I've gone, oh, I want that to be an actual beat, that's where I want the 2 of the bar to be, that's where I want the 3, the 4. And so I found this sort of 2 bars, which you, once it's time stretched, it becomes this kind of rhythmic thing. You put in the kick drum with that as well. Kind of brings it all together. This is a very traditional way of working if you're making like breakbeat hardcore from the 90s, right? You find the sample of a drum loop, you use that drum loop, you boost it up with a few electronic things like kicks, maybe a snare, maybe some hi-hats, then you find another loop from a breakbeat, from an old funk record, and then you use that as a percussion track. But on this case, typed in something like percussion track from a jazz record of the 70s, and you get, and I got maybe, what's that, 7/5 something like this, which has got that it's got that shakiness, and it's got a kind of a tom in there as well. But again, the feel of that is exactly what you want. It's that kind of like super organic, super dirty thing. So you just want to then force that into position. And I've used just half a bar again, just found a bit I like. It's got that tom and then that shaker, and that's all we wanted and all we needed.
Avoided it as a rule, and policemen had hung.
So that's kind of constructed those 3 together. And then later on we open it out a bit. Which I've just spun by, I think, stretching it even more so that it's like half time.
This
sounds awful on its own, but that's the same thing, but stretched so it's half, so it's double the length.
The mechanical child leaned forward.
And that gives us a rhythm track. Which works really nicely with that guitar that we did earlier. Gives it a kind of relentless quality. And then I just played the bass guitar underneath, and that's got a horrible, horrible buzz on it. But I think I chose, just chose to leave that in on the basis that it kind of had the right kind of feel again. It's just that electronic buzz seemed to suit what I was doing. So normally you would get rid of that. On this occasion I did not, using Neutron, so mixing plugin, so standard compression and stuff on that bass. Nothing particularly magic about that. The same one I did on the big main drums. Yeah, just a little bit of equalization and compression. Not quite heavily compressed on those drums. Yeah, I mean all that's just sort of standard mixing stuff, so nothing particularly novel or interesting about that. What else have we got in here? There is this other synth. This is another kind of electric piano, which is doing the Fleetwood Mac thing, or it would be doing the Fleetwood Mac thing. It's not on.
He halted the child's.
Oh yeah, it's just really quiet. slowly coming up. Yeah, slowly rising in volume up there. It's just doing that on the piano. I'm sure if Christine McVie was doing it, it would be much more in time. And but I was just doing that. That puts together a pretty decent rhythm track. Now the other thing I wanted was this choir of Julias. The choir of Julias you achieve in a different way, because that I had to train an AI on Julia, and I did show some of that in the other video. But basically, what that involved was I got an Indelicate track. I'm in the lucky position of having access to all the tracks there, so got a track of Julia singing something off Elevator Music, just her vocal. Removed everything else. Well, didn't bother printing everything else. Printed Julia's vocal onto a WAV file. And then took that to Google Colab. And a Google Colab, if you don't know, is it's basically you don't use your own computer. You use much better hardware that Google own on a server somewhere, but you use it remotely. So you kind of go. It gives you a high-end GPU, like an A100 or something. GPU is they're like it's like the graphics processing unit. Normally, it's what you use to run games, but it also is, for some reason, the architecture of the card works best with AI, so GPUs are what's needed. And the GPU in this computer is fine and can do things like generate images, but it's not very good at like doing good high-end things fast. And that's true of most people, because these are very good ones. So you go to Google Colab, it's free, and you just use someone writes software, puts it on Google Colab, you go in, use their software on Google's hardware, and then as a result you get to do high-end computing for free. So you go to this Google Colab, which in this case was a kind of timbre transfer model, kind of like a clever vocoder, but it takes the kind of pitch and mouth shape information from the inputted signal, but then it changes the pitch using just standard pitch shifting, and then changes the character of the voice to the voice that it's trained on. So you play it Julia, and it listens to Julia over and over again until it has an idea. That's a anthropomorphizing way of putting it, but it has an idea in a metaphorical way of what Julia is like, and Julianess is this, and the timbre of Julianess is this, and then it takes the inputted signal and it changes all the timbre, so it sounds like Julia instead of me. So I did this into the microphone. You get the idea. And then pitch shifted it up. So it's just like up 12 on a pitch shifter. Then sent that off to the AI, and it came back as a nice singing Julia instead, which should be something like... get the raw signal. And then put some reverb on it. Some mixing stuff. And then this track spacer is just it's a kind of what that does, it listens to another track and dips the volume in the places where that other track is, so that it comes through more clearly. And we do that with the voiceover, so that you can always hear what he's saying. So you do that with Julia once, then you do it again. Just with a different harmony. And then those two again, but down the octave, so that they are just more in my high range, Julia's low range.
Lines of the
And that's your choir of Julias.
The fool was a man, a human being. This world was...
And the last ingredient just being the voiceover itself, which is really as simple as going to 11 Labs, paying them a small monthly subscription, designing a voice by just saying, I want it to be an old British man, and then listening to a bunch of options and choosing the one you like. And then you kind of, you learn how to type things so that it reads them out in the best intonation possible, but it does a pretty good job on its own. The voice is one of the easiest parts of it to do, actually, just because 11 Labs is a really amazing piece of software.
And insensible, stumbled into the mechanical child's alley. People avoided it as a rule, and policemen had hung tape across its mouth, but the fool brushed through.
And after you've done all that, it's basically just a case of arranging it into a song shape, which is just normal, the normal way you do that. Anyway, I thought that'd be interesting. Some of the raw materials there exposed for your perusal. I think, yeah. Again, it's the organicness. It's the way. I think this is genuinely. Like, it sounds like other things. But there's a kind of uncanniness that I don't think you could have done a year ago because of the way that these things work. It's like it's a fundamentally different approach. Everything's upside down. You don't start by synthesizing from scratch or by sampling instruments. It's a different approach. It's all that bottom up stuff of like synthesizing, where you put things together from like oscillators or things, or the sample where you sort of like did minutiae of individual things and then try and build them back up into something that makes sense as a sample. It's like you start from the top. You start with the finished mastered recording and then take it to bits to kind of turn it into music. So it's a real inversion of the normal process, but it ends up having more in common with like 90s, 80s, but 90s really, 90s sampling processes that you'd use to make like Prodigy records. It has more in common with that than it does with 2000s and 2010s pop. So that's interesting. I think I might do this for some more of the videos, but in the meantime, thank you for watching. Goodbye.